Good afternoon, Media Center Ukraine. Odesa continues its work. In the next 20 minutes, we will discuss key violation of human rights in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. Our guests are Vira Yastrebova, Attorney Director of the NGO Східна правозахисна група. Good afternoon. And Irina Chaura, Human Rights Defender. Good afternoon. More than a week ago, you were here sharing with us the details about those atrocities committed by the Russians in the temporarily occupied territories. And now, a bit more than a week later, we see new terrible things. In Anthracite, a mercenary killed a daughter of local teacher. What do you know about that? Unfortunately, we have information about the murder of Smitlana, the daughter of a local teacher, in the city of Anthracite of the Lugansk region. He was a former prisoner and a fighter of the Storm Z. His name is Churikov Stanislav, and now he is wanted, but allegedly for deserting only. But the occupation authorities don't want to incite mutiny among local population. That's why occupiers they don't share the real reason for looking for that person. And that person raped and killed a Ukrainian girl. As far as I understand, there are a lot of such cases when such fighters kill locals, including women and girls. Unfortunately, yes, and we unfortunately see the increasing number of such cases. Could it lead to protests among locals? Of course, but we understand that the occupation authorities have been implementing policy to get rid of the local population, and they use illegal means just not to allow these rollers. And as far as I understand, occupiers need additional forces to deal with the possible protest. And in the Russian Federation, we can see the creation of new units of the Russian Guard. And they are even ready to recruit former prisoners. And they have candidates approved only from the territories of the Russian Federation. And the task for this new formation is to convoy and to control the Russian units at the first line. So the new units are involved in forcible mobilization and to create such control units. For example, in Krasnodar, there is a 116 Special Purpose Brigade. And they also are recruiting former prisoners. Such facts indicate that the occupiers are preparing for a new wave of forced mobilization. And that's why they need former prisoners from the Russian Federation who will join these new units. Just to ensure forced mobilization of men from the temporarily occupied territories. We know that the Donetsk region is famous for its mines. And do you know anything about the relevant factories and enterprises under the occupation? Unfortunately, we receive new facts proving closure of enterprises and from the mining and industrial complex. The concentration factory Komendansk has been recently closed. Mostly women remained without work. The occupiers announced the liquidation of the coal processing factory Komendantska, which is located in the village of Fashivka, Perevalsky district of the Luhansk region. This enterprise was one of the leading ones until 2014. Before the occupation of the parts of the Lugansk region. And we can say that the main function of that enterprise was to to process coal, so they used rock mass to process it and to produce clean coal that was further used at the thermal power plant. Mostly women worked at that enterprise because that factory was automized. When women asked where they can find a new job, the occupiers say them that they should grow their own agricultural products to sell. This is their approach to labor policy. So women are left without work. And now I have a question to Irina. Do they try to mobilize women? Yes, actually, that is what they have been doing, because now in educational institutions, in printed media, at enterprises, an agitation campaign has started for possible mobilization of women in the occupied territories of Ukraine. For the occupiers, women are a source of protest potential. They took everything from them, their husbands, their children, and now there is a campaign for these women to voluntarily join the occupiers' units at the front. Do you know anything about the judicial system in the occupied territories? Who work there? Yes, I can tell you the following. Out of 1,115 judges, only 236 persons joined the occupiers. And the judges from the Russian Federation, and they refuse en masse to go to the occupied territory of Ukraine. Therefore, the occupiers want to appoint local collaborators as judges. However, such actions are not in line with the expectation of the nationalists of the Russian Federation. They believe that former citizens of Ukraine should not be allowed to charge citizens of the Russian Federation. We also know that Russian mercenaries and actually Russian citizens, they love to loudly celebrate the anniversaries of the annexation of the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine, and we know the children are involved in these celebrations. Yes, they have the day of annexation on the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine, and we know that children at schools were first to publicly thank Putin and the Russian Federation. Such activities were organized by the deputy directors of schools for ideology. Propaganda in the schools of the occupiers is gaining more serious momentum. I also know that since 16th of October 2023, the Russian Federation has been limiting the entry of citizens of Ukraine to the Russian Federation and to the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. Yes, really, the Russian Federation has introduced such limitations, and now for Ukrainian citizens to get to the Russian Federation from other countries, they have two options through Ludonka, border crossing point of the Pskov region, and the Sheremetyevo airport. And these rules will be enforced for entry and also for exit. And we can see that the Russian Federation has been increasing control over Ukrainian migrants, and we know that such processes could be predecessors of negative development of the situation in the temporarily occupied territories. So we could speak about possible new wave of mobilization of the population there. You've mentioned that they fire women in the mine and industrial complex. What about men? Do they have jobs? And what about salary? Are there delays? We understand that Luhansk and Donetsk regions could boast a well-developed network of mines and enterprises, because occupiers keep closing these enterprises, but still their factories and facilities in the temporarily occupied territories. And only 7 mines are in full operation. And there are around 20 coal enterprises are in a standby mode. At the moment, occupation authorities of the Russian Federation don't pay to miners, and the debt amounts to more than 200 million rubles for the period from March 2023. However, the salary is no longer the same as it was under Ukraine. Currently, mine workers receive 70,000 rubles. A woman could receive an average of 7,000 rubles. And I'd like to remind that when the territory was controlled by Ukraine, the average salary of a worker at the same enterprises was 15,000 hryvnias, but the exchange rate for dollar was 8 hryvnias per dollar. And I would like to focus your attention that when Ukraine could not pay salaries, miners and trade unions went on protests, and the issue was solved. But now the occupation authorities, they try to silence the situation, and they force these people to work under machine guns. So the miners cannot even protest. Yes, there is no protest, there are no labor rights, there is no labor movement. There are occupiers, machine guns, and the possibility to use Ukrainians in labor. 12,700 Russian rubles. This is around 9,000 hryvnias. Yes, and this is also only on paper. They don't pay salaries, they accumulate debts, but people cannot get their salary. They're just fed with promises. So you've mentioned the children are involved in this propaganda activity. What propaganda tools do they use? I know that at schools, propaganda starts from first grades. They give weapons to children. They have been improving propaganda tools, and they have introduced a so-called Black Book, which is distributed by the Russian Military Historical Society. Children are forced to read this book at schools. Teachers, university students are also forced to read it. This Black Book contains fake information about some alleged crimes of Ukraine. However, such a tool is widely used in their propaganda for zombification of locals. So at school they read that, at school children read that, teachers read this book, and also students at universities. So they just invent some fakes to present Ukrainians as demons. I know that in the temporarily occupied territories, people could be detained for every disagreement. And now I know that they looking for people, for men who served in the armed forces of Ukraine before 2014. Yes, they are now detaining men who served in the armed forces of Ukraine before 2014. Or those who were law enforcement officers or have the status of the ATO participant. Unfortunately, over the past 2 weeks, 39 Ukrainian men have been detained who served in the armed forces of Ukraine, and they called them the proxies of the armed forces of Ukraine. After detention, there are several options for these men, detained men, to join the ranks of the occupation unit, which is called Storm Z, or serve a sentence and be convicted. At the beginning of this briefing, we've mentioned this tragic event when a girl was killed in Anthracite, and I know that they also raped Ukrainian women. Yes. Recently, we can see the increased number of rapes, and this information can be found in the summary of the occupation policy of the Russian Federation and the occupied territories of Ukraine. Compared to 2021, in the temporarily occupied territories of Luhansk and Donetsk regions, rape cases have increased by 84% compared to 2023. At the moment, over 10 months of 2023, in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine, over 219 cases of rape to women have been registered. These data do not cover Kherson and Zaporizhia regions. Moreover, the given data may not be accurate, as the occupation police do not always register such cases. Locals associate the surge in rapes with a high concentration of military personnel from the Russian Federation in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine and former prisoners that brought from the Russian Federation as a part of different occupation formations. Do you have any information about the average age of the raped women? Usually these are young women, from 18 to 40 years old. What about rapes of minors? Yes, unfortunately, these cases are also rather frequent. Here we need to say that occupiers do everything possible not to disclose this information. And quite often they persuade raped women not to submit claim, because it is not good for them. So they want to preserve the general image of everything being fine. The winter is coming. What is the situation with heating in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine, and what is with water and gas supply? At the moment, in the destroyed cities of the Luhansk region, Lysychansk, Popasna, Severodonetsk, unfortunately, there is no water supply, power supply, and the utility services are out of operation. The occupiers have also liquidated 4 mines that were previously part of Lysychansk Vuhilya, Lysychansk coal. So local residents have lost their jobs. Prices for food, medicine, and the basic goods remain very high. Since the end of September, the petrol prices have increased. Discontent is growing among the local population, but the occupiers plan to level the protest potential through the rapid force mobilization. Do you have any information about decreased population in the temporarily occupied territories? Yes, unfortunately, we have information about a significant decrease in the number of residents in the occupied territories of Luhansk and Donetsk after pseudo-elections in the occupied territories of Ukraine. And at the moment, the number of inhabitants in Luhansk region is 839,000 people, and in the territory of the occupied Donetsk region, it is 1.73 million people. According to the information received, the mortality rate in the temporarily occupied territories of Luhansk and Donetsk regions is 15.7% per 1,000 people. And the birth rate is only 3.8% per 1,000 people. This means that the demographic situation is very poor, and these numbers indicate actual destruction of the local population, and this is the impact of the measures taken by the Russian Federation in the occupied territories of the Lugansk and Donetsk regions. And I would like to underline that these statistic data do not include information about forcibly mobilized and missing in action. And we can only imagine what the real situation is if take into consideration these numbers. Thank you. Do we have questions from the floor? There are no questions, but I have a question to you. If the situation is difficult, the number of residents has been decreasing, what solutions do Russians offer? Perhaps they bring Russian citizens to those territories. There are recorded cases about migration of specific professions. The Russian Federation brings to the temporarily occupied territories law enforcement officers who then join the occupation units, constructors, teachers, and they pay double salary to them. Teachers are important to introduce their propaganda and black books. So there's some separate categories which are brought to those territories. But these numbers indicate the situation with the local population. So this is a conscious genocide. It is very important for them not to have people there who remember how it was before the Russian occupation. People had jobs, people had houses, and they had peaceful skies over their heads. 839,000 in Luhansk region, 1.73 million persons in the occupied Donetsk region. Are there a lot of young people in these statistics? You know, after the forced mobilization, after occupiers' activities in those territories, we can say that these are mainly elderly people who still stay there. But we know that there is no representative selection. We understand that the Russian Federation will continue implementing this policy, and only the armed forces of Ukraine can stop and rectify this situation. And what about young people? If they're still there, what do? They actively mobilize there. They teach them military activity. Those children who are in the temporarily occupied territories are under aggressive influence of the Russian Federation. They are involved in different events outside school where they popularize occupation policy of the Kremlin and Putin, and we also have information about the activities there. They buy weapons to teach children at schools how to use real weapons, like machine guns, Makarov's pistols, etc. Thank you very much, Vira and Irina, for being with us today. And I would like to thank once again you for your work. We've had with us Vira Yastrebova and Irina Chaura. They are at our media center, Ukraine, Odesa, to share information about human rights violations and crimes in the temporarily occupied territories. And this is the last briefing for today.